Morning, everybody. I wanted to welcome Chris Messina to our show today. Chris, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Well, we met in Denver during our event there, and you have a great venture started looking to solve some complex problems. We'll talk about that. But before we deep dive into that, would you please take a minute and introduce yourself?
Chris Messina. I've been in the partner ecosystem world for the better part of the last 15 years and building mostly ecosystems. So when I say ecosystem, I mean everything that can potentially add value to an organization, from resellers to sometimes even competitors and those integration partners, looking at that omnidirectional type of play. And I've been doing that for the last 15 years. I absolutely love the profession and love what we do here, but we also fail at an 85 to 90% rate. And that's something that I've felt really, really acutely. And that's kind of what led me to where we are today, after going in, building these things and having them in some ways be really successful, but not being able to effectively show my work and demonstrate that non-transactional value, all those things that partner teams do that don't show up in metrics and tools. That's the stuff that we had to be able to surface in order to really, get the C-suite to believe us. But yeah, as far as me, I'm also an ex-cop. I was in the Army. I've done quite a few things in my life. One of my proudest achievements is I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and been doing that for 17 years. And so that's why my ear looks like that. And also one of the reasons I have all the tattoos. It's part of the culture, I guess. And yeah, so that's me. And I'm here outside of Denver.
That's amazing. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. I've had a few servicemen and women on the show, so it's great to meet you. And I was going to ask you about the story behind the picture behind you, the plane.
Yeah, it's real. And it's, I wish there was a better story for it. I think it's a DC-10. That's what somebody told me at one point. I bought it for behind my bar years and years and years ago. And then I put a TV back there and like it back here. So it has no special meaning. I just really like the way it looks. And it's a conversation piece.
But do you fly or?
I grew up in small. My dad he had a Cessna pilot. And so we go up, and so I'm familiar with planes. I don't fly myself though. It was never any passion that I developed.
That's pretty cool. Well, let's talk about your venture. You started a cool company, and
Mm-hmm.
You gave me a glimpse of it when we were in Denver. And before we get into what it does, maybe you can go through the moment when you said, I got to go do this and I'm going to start this thing up.
Yeah, I'll give you the short version of that story. Eventually my TED talk, apparently, but it's, 15 years of having my butt kicked by this over and over again, building these things and then watching them fail on paper, and then looking at all the empirical evidence that demonstrates how incredibly valuable ecosystems are, but how frequently we fail. And so fast forward 2023, I'm working for a company, really good company. The CEO, not a bad person, but she told me, I don't believe in partnerships when I came in there. I was hired to appease somebody else. And we had this. So I spent 2023 really digging into the problem that we have. And the baseline problem that partners have is nobody believes us. So fast forward to January the following year, 2024. I had a strategy sitting on her desk for almost 6 months. My team and I were just sort of twisting in the wind. And you can imagine that's a really, really tough place to be, where you're not adding value. You're just there. And I finally went to her and I said, look, at the moment I could be making you a ton of money, but right now I'm costing you money. So we either need to move forward with the strategy or we need to move on. Well, they chose option number B. And after the initial hit, that day, which was February 13th, 2024, that's the date that will always live, because I hiked to the top of Mount Falcon over here, found it's middle of February, so it's freezing here in Denver, windy, get out on a rock, and I just let it all out. I really just had that emotional dump and decided I'm done. I'm burning the ships. I know the problem as well as anybody out there, and I think I can solve it. And I initially came at it from kind of a top-down perspective of maybe we can look at the propensity model around companies who have a higher propensity to be ecosystem orgs. But a lot of times you can't change things from the top down. We keep trying to do that and it hasn't worked. And so after about 6 months of beating it up and having people tell me, well, you're close, but your baby's ugly. It finally hit that we could solve this because of AI and where we are today. And that's kind of the genesis of the name Quark is it's if we can prove our value at that subatomic level. Quark is the smallest unit of the atomic structure. And if we can prove it down there, we can show all that value that doesn't show up in other people's metrics and tools. We can get that belief metric. We can get that C-suite belief and investment and buy-in. And so that's what we set out to do.
So maybe you can get into a little bit is that, why Quark? What are you actually trying to solve? What is the biggest problem you see?
Yeah. So the biggest problem that I see in the market is partnerships are invisible. And what I mean by that is there's a couple of different things there. One, we live inside of everybody else's metrics, KPIs, tools. Well, there's a couple of problems with that. One, as a result of that, we are constantly trying to extract our value after the fact. Two, the only way we know how to measure success for partnerships is leads and revenue, which in a lot of cases, especially when you get outside of the channel, are things that, when I say channel, I mean that direct sales relationship, like with VARs and MSPs, that type of thing. Those are things that those other partners really don't do well. Like if you've got technology partners, they don't do that well. And so really trying to understand where those things live, but we've got these. So by living inside of all these different tools, inside of all these different systems, we're constantly trying to extract value after the fact, forensically go back in and say, oh, here's what we can do. And look at all these things that I did. Well, the reality is not only are we invisible there, but because those belong to other people, we have this huge, what I call a get off my lawn problem, where they're coming in and telling us, no, that's my credit. I belong there. And so the other thing that you have to remember about all those tools is in those KPIs, those don't just measure success, they define it for them. And right now we have no such North Star. And so the big problem we're trying to solve is that visibility factor and creating a unified metric that we can all speak the same language. Because that's the other thing is, you've got, if I'm a partner leader at one company and you're a partner leader at another one, there's a good chance that we have very different KPIs because every time we go into a company, we kind of have to make it up as we go. And so that problem of visibility and being able to demonstrate, show our work, show our value, that's the problem I'm solving.
So let's focus on the metrics discussion, then we'll possibly come to your tool discussion or solution discussion. So, and maybe we'll do a simple 2x2. If you look at kind of mid-market on the x-axis and then mid to large enterprise also on the x-axis, like the two dimensions. And on the y, you have maturity of channel maturity, because at times large companies that are direct, they decide to get into channel or build a partner program. It's very rare today that they don't have programs in place.
Mm-hmm.
In mid-market or smaller companies, they may go direct as far as they can do, then and only they go, right? So if you think about kind of mid-market and enterprise, and then maturity-wise, whether infancy or sort of growing to a mature structure, in that 2x2, where do you think the metric problem is the largest?
That's a great question. And I would say that the metric problem exists on both ends of the spectrum, but in different ways. So at that large enterprise end of it, you're absolutely, those companies are investing billions and billions of dollars into their ecosystems. And so Google is a strategic partner of ours. And on our site, we quote Robin Rittenauer there is, we're solving the biggest problem she has. And that problem with those huge partner organizations is they have no idea what the long tail is doing. One organization, the quote that I got from him was, got 5,000 partners. I know what 50 of them are doing. Can you help me show them what the other 4,950 are doing? So for them, the metric problem is I can only show the value of a very small subset of those partners. And so it becomes that question of how do I continue to justify, like in Google's case, they have 100,000 partners. they can only really understand maybe about 5 to 10,000 of them. And so how do I start tapping into that long tail? What are the metrics? What are the places where companies are impacting? And we've seen Cisco make that move because partners are saying, look, I want to be valued for more than just bringing you a lead. And I do all of these other things for you. That needs to contribute to my ability to get your attention. And right now it doesn't. And so at the large end, it's being able to understand how partners are contributing across, effectively what we're solving is where are those partners impacting specific KPIs so I can optimize my ecosystem for where they are having actual impact and create functional cohorts of partners instead of just trying to have that amorphous blob. At the other end of the market, when we're smaller and we have an ecosystem organization, and if you go back to the big side, people want to work with you. You don't have to do a whole lot of recruiting out there. If I'm on the smaller side, I have to get the attention of those bigger players. I have to be able to go in there and prove my value to them. And so the metrics that I bring to the table is demonstrating to you what I'm doing. Here's the empirical evidence of how I'm benefiting you as an organization and why I deserve more of your attention. And then at that other end of things, as much as anything else, what this does is if I'm a small partner organization, it lets me show my work. When somebody comes and, I've had this question about 10,000 times in my career, what the hell are you doing all day long? Well, I go back in and write this long email of all these great things I'm doing. And then my joke is my job has been being professionally gaslit because they go, yeah, that's BS. Where are my leads? Well, now I can show what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, how I'm doing it, and then what I expect to get from it. And I can do that on an ongoing real-time basis. So if you, the CEO, come to me and say, what are you doing with these partners? Here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it.
So let's talk a little bit about, in your mind, maybe in these two areas, like mid-market emerging or some level of maturity with a partner program, and then large enterprise with very complex ecosystems. Can you walk us through key metrics that these two groups of people need to think about?
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of the metrics, like we need to be able to understand how are our partners impacting NPS, customer retention, customer growth, net new revenue, both on the logo and the existing customer side. How are they impacting our innovation? So these are all the things that partners impact. And in our platform, we have about 60 different vector metrics that we look at to say, where do these values exist, right? And where are these exchange of values that come in between these companies? And so the metrics that you need to pay attention to aren't necessarily a specific metric. It's what are the metrics I actually care about in my organization? What are my KPIs? Those KPIs, if I'll use a fitness example because everyone can kind of relate to that. If I want to look like a Marvel superhero, I know that I have to eat chicken and broccoli and rice and go to the gym and take special supplements and do all that stuff. I can measure that incremental progress to get to where I want to go. And I know what the outcome is going to be. Well, we keep trying to measure things based on just that outcome. We want to look like the Marvel superhero without understanding that path to get there. And so being able to see where those partners are impacting those KPIs, if you're hitting those KPIs, your revenue takes care of itself, as long as your KPIs are good. I mean, if you have terrible KPIs, then that's another problem. But so there aren't any specific metrics that I think are critical to an organization to be able to measure that partner success, because each partner brings different value. It's how do they impact the things that I care about? How do they impact my KPIs? And that's the important thing. It's not, I don't really care how they're impacting, this other company over here, because they're not me.
So if I kind of go back a little bit, this world channel, we kind of got transformed over the last 10 years into partner. In the channel days, it was predominantly about fulfillment. And therefore, some of the base metrics was coverage, dollar per like a partner rep, how much they're managing. And then based on segmentation, product line, product mix, and etc. Right? In today, going back to your frame, partners that you have multiple types of partners. You have MSPs, you have affiliates, some sell, some don't. Some are your direct customers, even though you call them partners. So what do you see from a KPI wise? Is there clarity in these large organizations what they need to measure?
No. And that's one of the things that, so I was at the MSP Summit several months ago, walked into the Verizon booth, completely cold, didn't know anybody there, had a quick conversation and immediately got ushered over to this person. You got to talk to so-and-so over here, because they have been trying for the last 2 years to build a metric for their ecosystem that measures more than just those things that you just mentioned. And they've been failing. It's a giant spreadsheet that doesn't work. Google, same type of thing. Been working with Cognizant and trying to build this thing for several years. It doesn't work because what happens is we're all trying to measure back to that linear value and compress that partner value into one little thing. And so at the end of the day, these large organizations have the exact same problems as the small organizations. It is, and channel has the, I know there's been this partner and ecosystem and channel kind of like, but reality, it's all the same problems. We all have the same issues of being able to demonstrate value beyond the lead and beyond lead and revenue. It's just where that's presented and how we are looking at it. Are we looking at a large ecosystem and I need to be able to understand the long tail? Or am I looking at a small ecosystem that I need to build and understand exactly where I need to focus my time and attention because I have such limited resources?
Yeah. So one of the challenges we see based on what you kind of, just said, in large, we have around 30 or so Fortune 100 companies, and we have, a few hundred mid-market, and their challenges are fundamentally different. In large enterprises, they have various set of product lines. They have a very mixed ecosystem. So when they're looking at just a lead referral program, they can't run all of those ARR metrics. Versus if they're working with a system integrator who carries product inventory and a whole bunch of other stuff. So from your perspective, maybe also through your platform, are you trying to address this segmentation or micro segmentation? Going back to the word Quark, is that they need to know at a sum bundle level who these groups are and what matters to them, and therefore what matters to the company from a performance management wise, right? You don't measure the sales guy the same way you measure the marketing guy or the engineering team, right? So what separations are you seeing, or what is your vision to address that fundamental, sort of areas of need?
Yeah. So the way that we start out is we have a taxonomy of value exchanges. So essentially, these are all the things that, and we look at those in different categories like customer success and, direct channel sales, and across. There's a lot of organizations may not touch some of those things. Like if you're a service organization, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of product exchange value there. But I need to be able to look at all of those different things. And so baseline, what we do is we go in and we understand, what do you value? Where do I have strengths and where do I have weaknesses? And where do I have resources available? And the other thing that goes along with that is, and one of the things that we are not able to tell anybody today as a partner organization anywhere, is what the I in our ROI is. Because we extract from so many different parts of the organization and we have to do that forensic accounting on the back end, we don't actually know how much we cost in most cases. So what we start to get at with identifying the values is not just where we have strengths and core competencies, but how much resource intensity is involved in there on that give side. Because if I have, let's just say I have a well-oiled machine partner marketing team, I know exactly how much they cost. They're dedicated to that thing. So I can carve that out and I can say, here's a cost that I can associate with this. If I don't have that and I'm having to extract resources and I'm using a marketing resource for a week, right? I've got 100% of their time. Well, that doesn't show up on the balance sheet. It's still just marketing. It doesn't show up as something that I have used. And so I keep saying to people, like, the people that I have to convince, it's not the partner people, it's the CFO. The CFO has to believe my metrics. And so if the CFO believes it, then we win. But yeah, the baseline is just creating that same value map with your partners and with your internal organization to say, where do we have resources available? Where do we have strengths that our partners want around, product integration, marketing, all of those different things? And where do they have strengths for things that we want and need? and how do we optimize and make sure that at a very base level, that's the first thing we're looking at is strength and weakness overlap, and then the intelligence builds on that.
So from a customer perspective, as far as your customers are concerned, the brands, if they have to deploy Quark, is there a piece of consulting service you provide? Because it's a journey that they need to go figure out, right? What I'm hearing from you is that you don't have to measure everything, but you need to know what matters to the partner and what matters to you and align those. And we know data is sort of kind of a mess in large enterprise. They have so many silos and buckets and you have to put them together. So how do you work with clients? What is that process looks like, pre-sales and post-sales perspective?
Yeah. And so the AI actually does a lot of that work for us. So as we know, every company's KPIs are going to be different. They're all going to have different ways of measuring things. So when we ingest it, we're only looking at what they're doing today. Over time, it'll start recommending next steps and where you go with it. But there's not a whole lot of consulting that it is a change management thing, but the idea here is to plug it in alongside of what you're doing and demonstrate that value, show the proof here. And so the hardest part, it's actually a very easy onboarding process because one of our partners is Syncari, SYNCAR, great company, but we use them as our integration layer. So we can plug into over 250 different applications right out of the box, and we can normalize the data before it comes in. And but we also rely on a lot of there are tons and tons of incredible consultants out there in this space. So I would rather bring them in to do that consulting aspect, because you're absolutely right. A lot of organizations need that foundational understanding of how do we move from A to B. And so if they're not ready yet, that's where we tap our partner network and we bring them in. But we are a pure play AI as a service. We're a system of intelligence. Like I joke that I'm trying to build the most beautiful platform ever that nobody ever logs into. So
let me, I want to go back a little bit onto the finalization of the metrics and tracking, etc., from a company perspective, because, on our PRM platform, we have Power BI. And what we see, and one of the reason we moved over, we used to provide out of the box 150 to 200 reports, and that would not satisfy most clients because they will have these unique questions and unique things that they want to run. A territory needs to run, and it's like greatly, right? They need hundreds and thousands of reports. So from a structural perspective, where does your solution fit into, like, if somebody has a CRM connected to a PRM, whether they take Salesforce and extend Salesforce all the way, whether they take Salesforce or ZINFI, extend all the way, where would you sit into that stack?
Great question. We sit behind it. And so we're ingesting from Salesforce and PRM. We show up mostly in the PRM. So the PRM, so ZINFI, we would integrate into there, and during that onboarding process, we'd just be in the background there as part of that onboard. We're getting that initial value. And then the other thing that we do to make sure that we're showing up in those things is we have a back of a baseball card, the highlights. So at a glance, I can understand where partners are contributing, what they're doing, where they have strengths, weaknesses, and the partner can see that inside of their portal as well, if that's an integration that's been built out. And so there are a lot of places where the data shows up for them, but the baseline metric that we're using on this is called the shared value index. And you can think of that like a credit score for the partners. And that's the key thing to start to understand, is that credit score is looking at 3 different things. First party, historical, and real time. Second party, like Crossbeam or Partner Tap or whatever it is that you are using for that account mapping. And then third party data, because I need to be able to understand where partners have specific things that are happening in the market, because right now it's so relational that we like working together. We're going to go to market together. We're going to do this webinar together. But if I have a resource of webinar, that costs money. I'm expecting an ROI off of that. If I just base it on the relationship, and you have a bunch of negative headwinds out there, you're getting tanked on Glassdoor and G2, and maybe you have an SEC violation somewhere. If I go to market with you, that's going to blow back on me. And so I want to be able to identify and understand, based on all of that data, which partner is most effective and who's going to have the highest propensity to create ROI off of this thing that I have available now. So our job isn't to replace PRM or in any way, shape, or form. Our job is actually to make PRM, Crossbeam, everything else better by making it more effective and making sure that the partner organization has the tools that it needs to be able to effectively demonstrate value, to get the investment it needs to grow and become the strategic organizational leader that it probably should become.
That's pretty cool. So can you talk to us a little bit more about this partner credit score? Like, how did you come up with the idea? What's in it? How many parameters are there? I mean, you already talked about Crossbeam and Partner Tab, et cetera, data sources. What about other third-party data sources like Hoover's or DNB or whatnot? Like, what are you trying to, what's in the model?
Yeah, in the model is, so like I said, you've got your first-party data, you have the second-party data on all the stuff where we've got the Crossbeam integration in there. And then the third-party data is looking at things like Crunchbase, G2. One of our big data partners is a company called BuyerCaddy. If you have a look, just kind of niche, but Craig Harris was the founder of HG Insights. I mean, now I started this and it's a phenomenal tool. So we pull a lot of insights from there around technographics and market. And so we're looking at that. We're looking at all these different signals and then also sentiment analysis. What is the sentiment around there? And then we'll start adding more things like Glassdoor and, we're going to add more and more and more data sets onto it as we go. Or if you have a data set that you're like, if you're subscribed to ZoomInfo and you're using Apollo or you've got all this Clay data running in, we'll be able to pull those things in as well. So the metric itself, where did I come up with it? I've been thinking about something along these lines for a long time. It's like, how can I effectively score my partners so I know where to spend my time? And the realization, like it took a little while to actually get to the understanding of what it was. We started having the concept of pulling it in. Like, it's a credit score. A credit score, it's a metric we all understand. We also know that in a credit score, we can see all the impact points. We need to be able to be really transparent about it so I can make decisions around this thing. Same thing here. So that shared value index lets you look at all of those impact points. So I can say, where am I? Why have we made this decision? Why have we given you this metric? We don't want a black box metric. That doesn't work. We need to be able to convince that CFO that this is real and tie it back to, ultimately it all ties back to revenue. But we need to show those revenue paths so we can say, just because you didn't get a lead from this partner doesn't mean that they didn't create revenue for you. Here's the indirect ways in which they created it, and here's the actual path.
So going back to sort of the credit score framework, if you're above 800, you can get whatever you want. If you're between 750 to 800, some of those things you may not want, or you may have to pay more. Like, how do companies would apply a concept like that business with partners?
Yeah. So think about it. Like, are you familiar with Bombora? And you've got intent scores. And so you have an intent score threshold, meaning I'm not going to surface anything that's below a certain point. Just like a credit score. You're not credit worthy if you're below a certain point. And so that might be different for different companies. Some companies might want to see it. It's a 0 to 100 scale. We wanted to keep it very simple. We thought about going the longer one, but it starts getting complicated the more you add. And so the idea is to keep that relatively simple, but also to be able to take that data and pull it out to where it's just extremely easy to understand.
And then from an application perspective, like, how do you advise your client to take that data? Like, so now that I know a score, what behavior do I need to change as a brand? Because in the end, what I'm understanding from you, it's about allocation of resources, figuring out which, credit-worthy partner are investable. So I go spend money so I can get better return, right? So can you walk through that? It's kind of a logical process. What would the company do?
Yeah. And so that's where the actionability comes in off of this. We don't have any desire to be an execution platform, but we want to ensure that you know how to execute. So as our agent in there is called Agent Q, it's a unicorn because I kind of have a unicorn thing here.
Right.
So Agent Q interacts with all of that data. and starts to pull it and surface it. And what you can do with it over time is what it'll start doing is recommending next best actions. What based on your stack. So if you're using like maybe I'm trying to think of some of the interesting tools that are out there, drawing a little bit of a blank right now, like Warmly, just had a conversation with them. And so let's just say you're using Warmly out there to activate your customers on these different places. Well, great. Why wouldn't we use that, run a play for our partners when we need to activate them in certain ways? So what it's going to do is start to tell you exactly, here's what you have, and here are the plays that you can run with this partner to be able to effectively activate this particular value exchange. And then here's 10 other ones where you might want to look at, and they might have different ways of going to market. And then you can run scenario analysis on that as well to be able to say, well, what if we looked at this instead of this? And so that way you can break these things down. Our job isn't tell you what to do. It's to give you the information to make the decisions, to know where to make the best guess as to where I'm going to focus my investments and my time.
That's pretty awesome. So where are you, Chris, as far as shipping the product is concerned? I mean, how many beta customers, like where are you? Because you started about a year ago, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
You've come so far.
Appreciate that. We are onboarding our first beta customers right now. And so we expect to have about half a dozen of them onboarded by the middle of August. And that includes some pretty large enterprises that are in there as well, that are dealing with a lot of, these enterprises, you think these channel organizations where they've sold 100% through channel would probably have figured this out by now. They haven't. And they still have the same visibility problems. So we have a couple of those that are onboarding with us because they need to be able to prove their value so they can continue to justify it. So the product is in market. It's built. It's still in beta. So there are still some things that are clunky, but I can say it's a very good looking product. It's very functional. I've got an incredible team here. I pinch myself every day because we're still bootstrapped. We're raising our pre-seed round, but I have about 11 people on this team who are some of the most talented people I've ever worked with, who have jumped onto this thing because they believe in our mission. They believe that we can actually make a change in this. And so, we are at that point where we are just about to start really getting, into that product market fit.
Heather Margolis, she got us connected, and I looked up your site at that time. I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. And I said, well, it's just another reporting tool, and we have one. I don't think it makes sense. Then I met you in Denver. And today, as I'm listening to the fullness of your vision, I think you're going after an incredible pain point that because these organizations have a lot of money, but they also spend a lot that they can't track what it's doing for them. I mean, in our business, we talk about three things we're focused on, which is visibility, control, and agility, right? We compete with a very big blue logo in the space, and we connect with them, we work with them, but at the end of the day, we're a tenth of their price. But when we ask customers, what they're really trying to do is get performance out of their ecosystems, right? So I think what you're going after is very, very pervasive, and you take something like manufacturing, which is a lot more complex than tech. A $5 billion tech company may have 100 SKUs. A $5 billion, manufacturing company may have 5 million SKUs.
Yep.
So now that you're putting that thing through without some sort of, integrated interface, it's very, very difficult to figure that out. But I want to come back to you. So you have had an amazing journey, being a cop, being in the service, pulling a company together. So how has it been like the last year? Was it as difficult being in the service? Is it more challenging, less challenging? Because when I think about a serviceman or woman, I'm like, that's the ultimate thing someone can do. Nothing could be more complex. So what is your take when you compare to those two experiences?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Nobody's ever asked that before, but actually being in the military is really easy. And everything is decided for you. You just have to show up and do your job and, be good at what you're doing. But you live in a box there. And so you can kind of, you have to be ready. You have to train, you have to do all the things that you need to do. But I know exactly what I'm doing every day because I'm being told what to do. This, the ubiquitous they that are out there that, they say this, they say that. Well, in this case, they were right. Then when they say this is the hardest thing you'll ever do, also the most rewarding. I mean, I joke that like my job today is mostly going broke and begging for money because that's it, but it is I've never been happier and I've never been more broke than I am in the last 20 years, but that's okay because I see the end of the tunnel. I see where this is going and I see what we're building here and I see the momentum that's building off of it. And so while this is extremely difficult, and I would say being a cop was maybe a little bit more analogous because, and that a lot of people think, being a cop and going to the military are similar. I actually counsel a lot of veterans on not going that route, not because they shouldn't be cops, but because it is an extremely different world. You have a lot of scrutiny. You're making decisions on your own. You have to do a lot of interpretation. And so I think there may be a little bit more of a crossover there where it's high stress. It is really rewarding when it's rewarding. But there's also a lot of stuff that has to happen that nobody ever sees or appreciates. This probably as well as anybody else is like, it's a great journey. It's not for everybody. And it is, I absolutely couldn't be happier with what I'm doing.
I had a podcast with Rachel Travis, and she was at our Denver event. She also came from the service. And it's very, very interesting. She roughly said exactly the same thing, that when you're in the service, things are defined for you. It's a lot more structured. Mm-hmm. Of course, you're making decisions or you're being part of life in that situation. So every decision matters. So you have to execute with precision.
Yep.
But when you come into a corporate world, it's very different. When you're an entrepreneur, it's very, very different. Yesterday, I did a podcast with Michael Gerber, who was the author of E-Myth.
Okay.
He wrote that book 50, years ago. And he talks about sort of three roles or characters, which is technician, manager, and entrepreneur. In every startup, the founder has to figure out which one the individual is. Am I great at modeling? Then I should get a manager and get someone to sort of figure out the vision, or am I more of an orchestrator? I become a manager, or am I really the visionary that is going to build this thing in my image? So where do you think you are? Which one? And as far as you think your team is concerned, do you have these other roles?
Oh, I know exactly where I am. I'm pretty heavily on the spectrum. I am very good at. I see patterns. I'm fortunate enough to see patterns in ways that a lot of people don't. That historically has not only always meant that I could do anything with it. I could see it, but I didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
So I am absolutely the visionary, the one who kind of has brought this all together. But I have my co-founder, William. He is very much the manager. And that's the reason why, and I've got 3 co-founders, but he was my main co-founder, the one that started this with me. The reason that he and I worked well together is because I know where I have shortcomings. I know that management and that detailed structure, I can build it, I can put it together. But then when it comes to executing it and doing it day in, day out, I struggle there. That's where my brain tends to go on to the next thing. And so I layer in those people. And so I am the one who is out there in the face of the company. My team is really the magic behind the scenes and doing some really incredible work. So I know where and that's probably one of the reasons that these people are willing to follow me, because I know where my shortcomings are and I give them permission to call me on these things. Like one of the reasons Jay likes me so much, and he's told me this, Jay McBain, is because he's like, you talk and think like an analyst. Not everybody does. So because I like that, but so I geek out on things because of what my brain does, but I need other people to help reel me in and make sure that they can help manage me. Like I need to be managed. We all need to be managed in some way, shape, or form. And so I rely on them for certain management things. And then I like I said, I'm extremely fortunate to have some really good people surrounding me.
That's amazing. So how did you pull them together? How did you convince them? Like what was one discussion? Was it 50 discussion? Was it like you pulled one and they pulled the other? Walk me through forming of the team, because my experience has been very different in this area. So, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I've worked with almost everybody on the team at one point, and which has been a really kind of refreshing thing because it's kind of personal thing, but I because of all that stuff that I had getting up to this point, I never really thought of myself as somebody that people would want to look up to and follow. And I've had that shift over the past several years, even before this, but really I reached out to my network and I was just doing validation with them, sharing them with them. And most of them came on board because they saw the vision and they got excited about it and they want to be a part of it. And so like our lead developer, Hunter, she's out in Kansas. My CTO and I actually know him from jiu-jitsu. We used to train together. So it really wasn't hard. And that's the thing that's been kind of shocking. Like I didn't have to convince anybody. If they didn't want to be here, I didn't try to convince anyone to be there. They're here because they believe in this vision and they believe in me. And that's something I take very seriously because I don't just do this for me and for those people, but this is an industry of people who I really love. And we get our butts kicked a lot. And I want to fix that. These people deserve their shots at the C-suite. They deserve their shots to build a team and get investment and become the leaders that they can be. And this is as much a mission of passion for them as it is anything for me. And I know that sounds kind of cheesy and woo-woo, but it's absolutely true. And that's one of the reasons I'm going up to the Yarbrough, and I've sponsored the Arcadia Leadership Conference next week because I believe in the community that we have here. It's extremely powerful, but it's invisible right now. If we can break out, there's some really, really cool things that we're going to see.
That's amazing. Well, Chris, with that, I think we're coming to an end. I thank you for being here. You have an amazing vision. I'd love to get an update in the end of the year, see where things are, and we should talk offline to see if there's a way we can integrate once you roll out your beta customers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciated this opportunity.
Thank you.